Welcome to
Learn Real Good,
a podcast
about science
and
comedy.
oh, nailed it. You know, we have this sort of ongoing narrative with the beginning of our show of, are we doing it the way we used to?
Yeah,
Is this the new normal?
All season it feels like, I don't know if it's even true that we had a signature way of opening the show.
Oh, we definitely did.
We definitely did?
As editor of the podcast, for sure.
Well, I haven't listened to the previous episodes.
Whoa.
I do it, and then, you know, it's like actors who can't watch themselves do the movie.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time listening to myself.
I used to and would have cringed at the idea of
Right.
having to, more watching myself than listening to
Sure.
myself, but having to edit this has
You've
made
heard
me
yourself
immune to it.
a million times.
But you know what? There's other ancillary benefits.
Right, such as?
Because I edit out the ums and the z, and it's annoying to do, I do it a lot less.
You do the mental
Exactly.
edits now.
Yeah, I feel like I'm constantly editing, like, as I go. Like, you know how when there's live broadcasts, they always, like, air it a little ahead so that if someone swears, they can, like, cut it out.
Right.
That's how I'm editing myself all the
So
time.
you're talking 7 seconds ahead from what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yeah? All right.
7 seconds.
Perfect.
That's what they call me, Katie 7 Seconds Pagnuco. Well, this isn't a podcast about talking in the future.
No.
It is a podcast about science where
Yeah.
we shoot the breeze.
Yes.
Done.
See, this checklist is part of the thing, but we don't
For sure
actually
it
have
is.
a checklist.
For sure it is. Well, we do now.
All right.
That's how podcasts work. The format, you know, organically unveils itself like in layers of an onion.
Oh.
Layer 2 of the
Yes,
onion.
it is.
Science facts.
Science
and then we
facts, for sure,
have
science
the
facts.
best part of our show. We have a
Is the
guest.
guest.
I'm very excited about our guest. From a
Same.
field we never get guests from, so it's doubly exciting.
It's math before you.
Whoa.
I'm spoiling it.
I'm cutting that out.
Don't cut
'Cause
that
I'm
out.
drunk with power.
Don't cut it out.
You jerk. Just cutting that whole section
Hey.
out.
Oh, man.
A guest on a mystery subject. It's going to be amazing. I'm excited.
I'm excited. But this is the second part, I guess, of our checklist.
Onion layer the second.
Oh, wow. I would hate to have that name.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Onion layer senior, onion
Yeah,
layer
yeah,
junior,
junior.
and then onion layer the third.
Before you get to our facts, since we're talking about onions,
Yes.
we had a brief side
I don't know where this
podcast.
is going. Oh,
Remember
yes.
where we have a young listener who loves the fact portion of
Yeah.
our show, and so
The
we
banter.
asked him some subjects he'd love to hear some banter about, and one of them was onions.
Yeah.
Not
We-
what I would guess from
We
what
did like,
he was like 8 at the
a
time.
Learn Real Good Family edition. There are 3 episodes that exist, and no one has heard them other than this family.
But I just love that a 10-year-old kid's going around thinking, "What's up with onions?" That's great.
Who doesn't want to know more about onions?
All right. Well, enough about that onion.
Enough.
Let's get to the onion facts.
Facts.
I hope you have an onion fact. Who
I
goes
don't.
first?
I don't have an onion
Do you remember who
fact.
goes first this time? Vinny?
I'll go first
Great.
again.
Go for it.
It doesn't matter? No.
No.
Okay. So let's talk about, the air.
Okay.
the
Yeah.
air.
Love it. Love
Now,
it.
you imagine you're building, let's say you're building some medical equipment.
Sure. Regular day for me.
Regular day for you. And you want to detect some radioactive material. All right. Now, some people are familiar with this, but for those who aren't, if you are building an instrument that
Yeah.
requires really high sensitivity to radioactive equipment, say you have a detector that's detecting particles in a physics experiment, or you're running a medical experiment where you've dosed someone with some like a little radioactive dye, and you need to detect the sensitive amount of radiation.
Yes.
You cannot build that material, the instrument, with radioactive material, because your
okay.
instrument will detect itself.
Is it hard to avoid radioactive materials?
Well, here's the thing.
Oh,
now,
no.
Oppenheimer has brought the idea of nuclear testing.
I think it was actually
into the
Barbie that
forefront.
did that. Okay.
So Barbie has brought nuclear testing to the forefront of our minds and our collective society these days.
Right.
But Oppenheimer, I will say, also had an
Sure.
effect.
Okay. Fine.
When they first started nuclear testing, it was above ground in the air, and they did hundreds of tests. Governments around the world, not just the Americans, but the Russians and everyone else who was working on nuclear bomb up until about the early 60s was testing above ground. And so all of these nuclear bombs went off. That radiation stays in the atmosphere.
Sure.
It takes a long time for it to decay out of it. And so from, say, the mid 40s all the way to the early 60s, about a period of about 15 years, hundreds of nuclear bombs testing were happening in the atmosphere,
Wow.
which contaminated the
Yeah.
atmosphere to a degree. Now, steel, metal, is used in instruments,
Sure.
but part of the process to make steel is forcing air into the
Oh,
chamber.
my goodness.
And so it automatically becomes contaminated and it's stuck in the steel as part of its formation.
Whoa.
So all of the steel that used air since the 40s has been very lightly radioactive.
Neat.
It is neat. It's like a little fascinating fact. Now, here's what's interesting. Steel that was created before the 40s
Golden.
is very valuable.
Wow.
It's very valuable
For that
because
reason.
when the air was introduced, there was no radioactive material in it. And this is called pre-war steel or like clean steel.
Okay.
And there's another, not just the steel that gets fabricated in this way is radioactive, but lead is also naturally radioactive.
Mm-hmm.
And so lead that gets mined has its own radioactivity to it. It decays itself naturally over the course of decades and centuries. And so there was a Roman ship that carried lead ingots as part of its, like, it was sailing around the Mediterranean, shipping lead from one of its mines to a city that needed to build plumbing or whatever, and it sank. But recently recovered lead. And so that lead has, over the centuries, decayed all of its natural radioactivity. So it is very, very low or nearly no radioactivity.
Get that together with some clean steel. You got yourself a sweet instrument.
You got yourself a very beautiful, clean instrument. Now, here's the part.
Oh, where's the rub?
Here's the rub.
Okay.
We're basically have returned to pre-nuclear times. The radioactivity in the air has decayed to the point where it's only very, very lightly above the natural background of our atmosphere. So our atmosphere has its own natural radioactive components just because we live on a planet. Things are radioactive. Bananas are radioactive. Little fact, because of the potassium.
Mm-hmm.
But we are now entering a period where it's not worth it. And so up until like maybe 5-10 years ago, if you're building a sensitive instrument for science or for medicine, you needed to get this like pre-war steel,
Right.
or ancient lead. The lead you still need to worry about because that just doesn't decay on its own. But the steel, you can just get some steel off the shelf now. So there you go.
Interesting. So that you're making it sound like that's bad news. Isn't that good? Does that
It
mean
is
it should
good
be
news.
cheaper?
It is good news.
Cheaper
It's
instruments?
just this like cool little fact is no longer relevant.
There's the rub. This
Yeah.
is no
That's
longer
why
hot
I'm sad.
science
That's
news.
why I'm sad.
Had you figured this out 10 years ago, and had we been making a podcast 10 years ago, that steel that we've been keeping in the basement would be worth a lot more money.
I just think it's
than
fascinating. Like they would go to the bottom of like the ocean to find like old battleships and then salvage it. Not for any of the stuff on it, but really for the steel that went into making it.
Because of the time it was made.
Because of the time it was
That's
made.
nuts. I didn't know that.
There you go.
That's a very interesting fact. Maybe not as interesting as you wanted it to be in your heart of it still being worth money. But you know what? I'm glad as hell I know it.
I know.
And I'm sure our listeners are
I shouldn't
too.
have bought all that pre-war steel is what I'm
Well,
saying.
you know, that is a questionable choice that you made. But yeah, interesting. Cool. Good fact,
There
Vinny.
you go. Thank you. Katie, I'd love to hear your fact.
I do have a fact, and I've been dying to talk about this because this is like hot news.
Ooh, hot goss.
When I say the year 2003, what do you think of, Vinny?
Wow. 2003? It's like 20 years, the 20th anniversary of 2003 this year. So congratulations
Well,
to that.
that is relevant.
I don't.
Major scientific developments in the early 2000s.
Major scientific development of the early 2000s. Human Genome Project?
Yes!
No, get out. Did I really?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Oh, wow.
We did not.
I mean, that's the only one that really stands out.
Well,
that was a huge deal.
That's why I baited you that way.
All right.
Yeah, so about, I think it was 2003.
Sure.
Should have fact checked that.
Nah, that's okay.
About
Science
2000.
facts in quotes.
2000 plus, not minus. It was definitely 2002 to 2003. The Human Genome Project. So what do you think we accomplished with that, Vinny?
We mapped out the human genome.
No.
One person's human genome.
No.
We found out there was a genome.
It's nice.
Humans.
It sounds like...
You know, right. I have no idea what they did.
Yeah,
well, it sounded like they completed the sequencing of one person's genome.
Absolutely not.
Dang, I have no idea what they did.
Well, they got some sequence of one person's genome, but not all of it. Because
But they completed it.
No, they didn't.
They started it?
They completed as much as they could reasonably get, but there were some huge gaps.
What were they celebrating for?
Well,
They made big news.
They went through it all, but there were chunks that were just going to take way longer, requiring technologies that did not exist.
Was this like
yet
a
to
college
decode.
student project? Like, close enough.
I guess so, because I agree. I was sold on, we know every letter.
They just high-fived
no.
each other and said, peace, we're done.
Yeah. In fact, there was another project a couple of years ago called the telomere to telomere project.
Okay.
And their goal was like, no, really, it's been about 20 years. We want to go every letter.
Okay.
And they did it.
So when they're doing this, is there a specific person that they're sequencing?
They do entire human genomes, yes.
I don't know what that means.
So when they sequence, they, at this point, are getting an entire
A set of
organism's letters. Yes,
so
and they've done that for several people.
Are they picking one specific person as like the golden, like, are multiple groups referencing this one person, or?
No, we've had human genomes decoded several times.
Okay.
You know, people from different places, different
okay.
backgrounds. It's been done, but not completely. Not every letter.
Not every letter. So the telomere to telomere is like, we're going to take this one cell and we're going to go letter by letter.
But even then, with it being seen as complete, there were gaps.
They still didn't finish?
In particular, with one chromosome. Do you have any guesses as to which chromosome is the real tougher one?
God, it's always the Y chromosome.
It was the Y
God,
chromosome.
men are terrible.
So the well, not all men.
Not
have
all
Y
men.
chromosomes.
Hashtag not all men. There you got
Well,
it.
no.
No, wrong hashtag?
Y chromosomes aren't not necessarily a necessary and or sufficient
You're right.
condition
I'm
for
sorry.
maleness. So, Y chromosome. What else do you know about it, aside from it being associated with being assigned male sex,
Sure.
typically?
It's shorter.
Yeah, it's real small. So the irony that this rinky-dinky chromosome that usually gets written off as having a couple of genes and then a bunch of crap
Right.
ended up being the hardest one. And it's partly because of that. So there are quite a few genes. A lot of them are associated with secondary male characteristics, but there's a lot of other stuff going on there as well. But the reason why it took forever to code is that about half of it, about 30 million bases of it, are gobbledygook. They're repetitions, like ATGC, 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 or palindromes, ATGC, GTA. And when you have that, it makes it really hard to sequence the way we sequence.
Oh, really?
So the way we sequence very basically, I mean, is you make a little primer, so a little strip of DNA that's single-stranded and has the letters that's going to hunt a part that you know is in there, and then you use the basic mechanics to sort of build the rest.
Okay,
but
like it sticks to that base.
yeah, but having it stick when you have that same sequence all over the place and having it sort of process it, you end up with someone in this article I was reading gave a good analogy. It's like trying to put a book together that's been cut up several different times, several different ways. When you have the same sentence over and over again in several places, you're going to see that thing over and over again, and how do you know where it goes?
Yeah.
So it's taken 20 more years of development of the technology of sequencing to get to the point where they could say, no, this is it, letter for letter. And this was just completed.
They
Those
just
30
did it.
million letters.
I'm
in this
skeptical they
repetition.
actually did it this time.
Yeah, I
they
know.
cried wolf too many times.
Well, you can see the entire sequence in the article.
I'm going to read it all and double
I
check.
know.
I'm going to double check.
There's an A missing here.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why
notes.
we're so interested, aside from just completion, finally completing this project,
Right.
is that the Y chromosome is a little funny in some other ways as well. So it's been noticed that individuals with the Y chromosome can start to lose it as they age.
Whoa.
Their cells don't have the Y chromosome anymore. Well, it's associated with aging, and lots of people think it might be why there is such a large lifespan gap between men and women, having to do with aging, losing the Y chromosome, and the damage that comes with that. So it's also been seen that individuals who are losing their Y chromosomes from their cells have a higher incidence of cardiovascular disease and bladder cancer.
Can we like take a pill?
Of
Like
just a
Y
bunch of
chrome. It's like
Y
really,
chrome.
yeah, Y chrome.
Someone will sell it, but how do you get it from your digestive system, where it's now
Yeah.
been destroyed because it's
Yeah.
highly acidic,
Uh-huh.
into your cells?
I'm gonna figure that out.
Well, good luck with that, Vinny. That's gonna be a very, very successful energy drink.
All right.
Anyway, we can finally sit back, relax. The entire genome, letter for
We did
letter,
it.
the final hill to climb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Congratulations, humanity,
Congratulations.
for finally saying that you did the thing that you said you did 20 years ago.
Right? I
That's
know.
surprising.
Well, you know what? A lot of it was because a lot of the genes had been sequenced.
Okay.
And really, even 20 years ago, we thought that's all that mattered.
Oh.
Right?
But
Genes.
no.
Well, we're starting to learn that not just telomeres, but all sorts of
Everything, the whole thing.
non-protein coding things do
The
important
whole
stuff.
thing's important.
The whole thing's important,
The
man.
whole- the
That's
whole-
why it's there.
That's why it's there.
That's why it's there.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be there.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, that's
Yeah.
really cool. Well,
Yeah.
good work.
I know we're going to
telomeres.
have a party here tomorrow. A
We
Y-shaped
are?
cake. Yes, celebrate the completion of the Y,
Wow.
man.
I'm going to eat some of that cake and hope it fixes my chromosomes.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do know we have a great guest.
Oh, good. Ooh, good segue. Smooth. All right. Today's guest is Christopher Mahadeo. He's currently a research assistant professor in mathematics at the University of Illinois at Chicago. He recently obtained his PhD in mathematics from the University of Saskatchewan. In math lingo, his PhD thesis investigated the relationship between twisted Higgs bundles and topological recursion. In slightly more user-friendly language, he studied the geometry of shapes related to high-energy physics and strange quantum materials. Christopher's favorite pastimes are reading manga, watching anime, and swing dancing. Hey, Christopher, welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome, Christopher.
Oh, I'm very honored and happy to be here.
The honor is ours. First,
Yeah.
we have to congratulate you. You just
Yes.
finished your PhD and right into an academic position. That's amazing, doctor.
Yes.
Yes, it's out of one frying pan and into
Yes.
a
Yeah.
much larger, hotter frying pan.
Yes, toasty, comfy,
Yeah,
cozy.
Yeah.
Well, this is very exciting. We've never had a mathematician
Our
on
first
the show.
math grad. This is great.
Yeah, and only our second sort of physics adjacent.
Yes.
So this is untrodden territory. And Vinny has a physics background,
Right.
but this guy is going to have to learn some words.
I'm excited to hear Katie's questions. That's what I'm excited
So
for.
I would love to break this down a little bit into digestible chunks for my tiny biologist mouth. Higgs bundles. I hear that and I think Higgs boson. Are they related? What's a Higgs bundle?
They are. I mean, how related they are is like a good question.
Oh, shit!
no.
Right off the bat.
Well, the name was actually like inspired by the Higgs boson. I'm not super versed in kind of like the grand history of how or why they're actually related, but somehow these are objects that we, there are these like massive equations that govern how the universe looks. These are the Yang-Mills equations, and Higgs bundles arise from like taking a very like simple form of it. This is like I'm not gonna paint a Picasso. I'm gonna do one of those like color in Picassos instead.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah. That makes
And
sense.
when you do this reduction, you end up getting these like beautiful amount of mathematics that arises from it. And somehow the Higgs boson is related to the original equations, and it was named a Higgs bundle. I'll say that related to this, my advisor has the story of he actually met Higgs, Peter Higgs, maybe it's the name, but he met
I
like
think it's Peter.
the Higgs boson, Higgs, and I guess they were talking about Higgs bundles, and I do not know that this person knows that there are mathematical objects named after him.
That's really funny.
Yeah, I guess.
Can you imagine being so famous there's a bunch of shit named after you? You're like, really? That one too? Never heard of that.
Well, let's go back a step, because I guess I want to ask the question: what is topology? Like, just as for people who don't even know what the study of that is.
Yeah, there's maybe a common like colloquial misconception between two notions, which is geometry and topology. Topology is really about understanding a shape. A simple thought is like, how can we tell two things apart? If I blindfolded you and put two donuts in front of you,
They would be eaten.
no, well, Of course.
This is a great experiment. Let's do it again.
Okay, so I put another set of donuts in front of you,
I
but
eat them
I tell
immediately.
you to hold on. Oh my goodness. I put it in front of Katie because maybe Katie's not going
Oh
to eat them
yeah,
right away.
that'll work.
They're long gone, but I'm telling you, the second set, I'm good, Christopher. I won't eat the second
All
set.
right, good.
You know, certainly if you ate the donuts, you'd be able to tell me the difference between a chocolate dip and a Boston cream based on some deliciousness factors. But if you just touch the donuts and like felt them, if you felt that Boston cream, it feels like a solid donut. But once you started to handle the chocolate dip, you notice that there's a hole in the middle.
Right.
If I tried to like mix it up and threw like a nice fresh pretzel in there, you might feel 3 holes.
Right.
And so you'd be able to tell the difference between these two shapes. And this is based on, let's say, the number of holes that they have. In mathematics terms, this is the genus of the surface. And so topology really doesn't care about what flavor your donut is. To the topologist, the chocolate dip, same as the maple dip. Same as the vanilla sprinkles. Same as like the sour cream glaze. I feel bad that there are maybe like people who don't understand all my aggressive Tim Hortons references.
We are here for them.
The donuts are universal. That's my opinion.
So yeah, like topology is just like I want to be able to tell my two shapes apart.
Interesting.
Really cool.
Now let's throw the word recursion into the mix. What's that doing in there?
So something is recursive if let's say something that is being done is recursive if like the one step is based on previous steps. And so this procedure that I work with, topological recursion, it's some kind of way of we're trying to understand some fact about the shape, but it's actually like really hard to understand this fact. It's like crazy. So instead we're going to break the shape down into like somewhat ugly pieces, but on each of those pieces it's actually like pretty easy to do this.
So kind of like the symmetry of a snowflake.
Yeah, maybe like yeah. And so on each of these small pieces it looks horrible, but it's easy to do, and we assemble it in a particular way. And the way we assemble it is like very recursive. We start with this one piece, and then I know how to take this to the next step up. I can take this piece and multiply it by this piece. And if I want to take a step in this other direction, I take these two pieces and I add something else to it. And we can do this over and over, and it produces a way to understand whatever I wanted to understand, now given in terms of these smaller pieces.
Oh, to bring it back to donuts, it would really be like if you took a sour cream glaze, let's say, and you divide into like a million skinny, thin slices. Like the ones that are next to each other would have similar hole sizes, right? So you could use the previous slice to figure out what the next slice is based on the hole pattern. It's just a little different. Am I really off base, Christopher, or can I talk about donuts some more?
Oh no, because that's one of the problems with like trying to explain like higher math things is that the need to have the complexity arises when we like enter realms that people don't usually think about.
Yeah.
So
totally.
This donut analogy, perfectly wonderful.
I'm basically a mathematician, is what you're saying. That's what I'm hearing.
I think one of the things that's really fascinating, and this is true of like physics, is when you get to the really like higher level, more recent stuff, the stuff that is at the like macro level, which is like a roller coaster. If I build it this high, it has this much energy and it goes around the turn. That stuff people can get rather intuitively because I know what a roller coaster is. We interact with it. If I talk about chemistry, when I cook and I mix this with this and I get a cake, great. I understand how these chemical interactions, they become intuitive because that's how it. But when we talk about things like, say, relativistic speed, it's like, well, what happens if I have one spaceship going at like a fraction of the speed of light and it's headed toward another spaceship going at another fraction of speed? Like, am I not, like, does one look like it's going faster than the speed of light? And it's like, no, they don't add like you would like a car passing a car. And this like totally not intuitive, because once you get to relativistic speeds, velocities add in like this crazy complicated way. And so we end up in this really unintuitive world. And I imagine that's the kind of world you live in, Christopher.
Yeah, there comes a point where you can no longer really like picture things, or like you have to picture things in like really simple abstract ways. Let's say when I'm here, I'm teaching my class about vectors, and I'm like, guys, just so we can have vectors in any dimension. And it's like, oh yeah, sure, okay, you can just imagine like a list of numbers that's really long, sure. But when it's like, how many times can I wrap this donut around the other donut? And how many times when I do this wrapping does the donut cut in and intersect itself? And it's like, that's not as easy to picture.
No.
We've talked a lot about donuts, and we know that Tim Hortons has more diverse selection. So what is your math equivalent for the iced cap?
Oh, you don't have to answer this one.
I'm gonna let this mull over.
Yeah. Let it percolate like a cap.
Let it defrost a bit to that nice silky point.
So I guess, because I'm trying to imagine the math that you have to do the research that you did for your PhD thesis. And I'm just trying to think of like the last math class that I had to take to do physics. And I'm sure it's probably above average what the general person has to learn.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Right. But then I'm trying to think what you had to learn, and it's like I can't even wrap my head around what kind of. So like, what are some of the things that you need to know to do the work that you do, like topology classes? But what are some of these fields of math that the average person probably doesn't even know exists?
So I'd say you can kind of like split math up into a couple of like reasonable things, and like I'm mathematicians everywhere are like getting ready to getting their pitchforks what he's about to say. You have things that are kind of like the field of analysis. And analysis is like you are trying to like understand in like a very precise numerical sense things related to some other field. So whereas like a topologist is like, I don't really care what size this is, I just want to know how many holes. The analyst might be no. There's an upper bound to this. We're going to find that.
Right.
Analysis may be also kind of like very similar to the type of stuff one might do in like a calculus course, where you're like, I'm going to find what this limit is.
Right.
But in a much like larger, crazy sense. Then you have kind of like geometry. Geometry is more interested in some kind of, you have your shape, but then some kind of structure on it. So like the ability to measure things. And so, there are any number of like crazy geometries that we can add. But, if one just thinks about the ability to measure something, that's already like, we lived on Earth for a long time before we started to talk about distances. Right. So we lived a long time without any notion of geometry on the Earth. And then you kind of have very adjacent to that is topology of like shapes. Then you have some fields like probability, which is like, taking our usual like coin flips to next levels that even I don't really understand. And so, even just at that like basic level of splitting things up, and to all the mathematicians out there, I'm sorry, there are probably other things that I should have said. I'm so sorry.
That feels like calculus, algebra, and geometry and finite, right? That's how we learned them in high school. I'd say that's like a pretty fair like way to split it up in a sense that like a more normal person could understand. But even in like geometry, it's like you have people who study like complex geometry, like algebraic geometry, symplectic geometry. You might do like purely differential geometry. And even within those fields, like everybody in my advisor's research group arguably did the same type of geometry, but I could not tell you what any of them did their work on. Fascinating.
That's amazing.
Have you ever seen those lists on the internet that's like top 5 sandwich toppings, top 5 movies of the year, top 5 celebrities who have a very punchable face? You know what I'm talking about. The point is, all these lists drive us crazy because we have no idea who made them and how they even narrowed down their top 5 list. That's where my podcast comes in. My name is Tung La, and I am the host of Ranked, top 5 lists of stuff that don't matter. In every episode, with the help of a motley crew of self-proclaimed experts, we debate, battle, and work together, showing you the entire process of how we got there, to create a top 5 list of any and every topic we can think of, like top 5 brunch menu items, top 5 fictional dogs, top 5 90s songs, top 5 Steves? The list goes on, and we will not rest till we rank basically everything. So join us every second Thursday in the Pod Cavern for Ranked, top 5 lists of stuff that don't matter.
Top 5, top 5, top 5.
So when I think of like what a conference is like for a biologist, right? You go to conferences, it's always like, oh, we've improved technologies and so we know this better. Or, oh, we're just like almost improving the microscope in all aspects, not just microscopy, right? Just better technology, understanding things better at a smaller and smaller level. Or if we're talking about bigger things like in ecology, better and better math, better and better statistics to sort of understand patterns and that sort of thing. What the hell is new with math, right? Like when you go to a conference, what are like the developments that are happening? It's just so far from my brain. I don't understand. Like what's the hot new discoveries in math?
It's this differs a lot, like field to field. So if we think about, let's say, like numerics, for example, that might be someone saying like, I actually have a new algorithm that will help us to better understand shallow water waves, and everyone's like, oh well, yes, we're going to understand shallow water waves now. That's awesome.
Supportive group.
Oh, I wish it were always like that. And the kind of stuff that I do, it's questions are either kind of like largely motivated by physics, or they're just like Alice down the rabbit hole. It's like it's like either someone thought like I bet you could do this thing that the physicists do with this other objects. Let's check that out. Or someone's like, this is really cool. I'm gonna keep poking at it and see what happens.
Right.
The stuff that I do is like very far from like, I take on my calculator and do some calculations. It's more of like, I'd say it's more of like in like a weird way, maybe being like a lawyer, right? You have to present your case and this fact and like here's this other fact that I'm trying to convince you that like my shape is not guilty.
Yeah, of having too many holes.
That is fascinating.
Exactly.
That is a fascinating comparison.
Well, you got to build up your evidence. You got to build your
makes
lines
a
of
lot
reasoning.
Of
And then, use the things that have already been proven to build upon that and go further.
I mean, obviously there are sometimes levels of people doing like hard computations, and my shout out to them for having the patience for that. But very often, it'll be like I want to, I'm at point A that we know is true, and there's this point B that I think is true. How can I construct a sequence of arguments that will convince you, or that will convince somebody that it is true? And like sometimes it doesn't, like to look at a math proof, let's say, it doesn't look very mathy. Sometimes there's just a lot of words. Right. The math is like hidden behind words. So it's one of those things. Yeah.
Where it belongs.
Oh, no.
Hide those numbers. Hide those numbers. So, Christopher, let's try to get back to your research. We're going to try to wrap our teeny tiny brains.
Yeah.
I think we got a handle over the basics of topological recursion through donut theory.
So now we know what part of the world you're in. What was the question, I guess, that you asked?
So we have a beautiful donuts, and people have been studying these beautiful donuts. And I'm like, what if my donut has special points on it? I'm gonna put a couple of, I'm gonna keep this donut analogy going strong.
Keep it going.
Instead of just like a normal donut, I have a donut with maybe some like little berries inside of it. And at each of these, I want to do this same process. I want to break it into pieces, but I want to try to remember where those little berries were. I want to know what happens if I have a decorated surface. So my donut with some points on it, we're like, oh, there's a berry here, there's a berry here. What happens when I break that down into pieces and do the same procedure?
Whoa. And is that the twisted Higgs bundles component?
Yes.
Or am I missing it?
No, yes. So the twisted refers to the fact that there are these points, these berries.
Okay.
I feel like maybe chocolate chip would have been like a more natural analogy. I was going to
like
say
it.
a blueberry
I like it.
donut, but I don't.
I want a berry donut, man. It's working.
Yeah.
So these things connect. This topological recursion, this twisted Higgs bundles, they connect somehow. What's the connection? Or is that what you're trying to figure out, how these two different things align?
So there was some work already done in the like original case, and it was to the effect of there's this donut that you get from the Higgs bundle, and the topological recursion told you information about the donut. And I wanted to know if you could get the same information from a donut with marked points on it. Can I do the same thing with my berry donut?
Right.
And this kind of coming back to maybe the like people being motivated by either physics or just because something like asking what happens if I have some extra data. That's something that people are sometimes just abstractly interested in. They're just like, yeah, well, can I generalize this a little bit? Part of my motivation came from work by my wonderful advisor, who I will plug, Stephen Ryan. He actually like wrote several papers that were, made quite a bit of waves in like the condensed matter, like quantum material field about the so-called like hyperbolic quantum material. And in this theory, these twisted Higgs bundles come up. And so it's kind of like a natural question to be like, we want to understand the shapes related to these twisted Higgs bundles, because that will let us understand this brand new class of quantum materials. So it made sense to see if I could use this procedure that people had success with in the normal case in this twisted case.
Wow.
So my next question is going to be, is there experimental data that you can use to kind of validate or invalidate, or is this purely a theoretical exercise?
At some point, quite possibly, yes. There's a bit of a gap between what I am doing right now and like the real world stuff. But the motivation for what I'm doing is like real world. Like there are already people, there are like research group out there building like hyperbolic photon circuits. And so, the kind of hope is that maybe, if this procedure can calculate what we want to calculate, there could be a way to computerize it.
To make a model.
Wow.
Yeah, so that somebody could plug information into the computer and it would spit out some facts about your shape. Because it turns out that for these weird quantum materials, information about this donut tells you a lot about what the material can do.
One of the fascinating things, like, as someone who studied physics, one of the fascinating things for me, the history of physics, is that very often it runs into natural phenomenon, and everyone's like, whoa, what's happening here? And then some physicist wades through the mountain of math history and finds like, whoa, someone did some math wrote a paper on this like in 1730 about falling off of horses, and then it's like it's totally applicable to what we're doing. And then it's like, oh, this problem has already been solved, and now just apply it and it gives us the right answers and it gives us a good model. And so very often physicists encounter something and then just go, some mathematicians probably figured this out, and just had it in an abstract way. And now we can just grab whatever idea they had, apply it to our situation and be like, oh, this totally works. Great. We solved it. Done. And then every so often mathematicians come in and is like, oh, what's happening over here? And then they like start poking around like, whoa, this shouldn't be happening. And then they start coming up with a whole bunch of ideas, and they go further beyond what's actually testable in physics, like the experimentalists, and go into like theoretical physics. And that's where the line between mathematics and physics at a theoretical level, they're kind of indistinguishable. Like they're just applying these strange math tools to these like theoretical ideas. And so for me, it's always fascinating to have that back and forth between, oh, we found this thing. What does the math say? Or here's some math. What does the physics say? And it, like there is like a back and forth between those two fields in a really cool way.
Oh yeah, it's wild. Even, earlier this year I attended a conference which was very at like the precipice of math and physics, and it was really, I mean, there were those who could like really like strut the line, and like they were on point for both, and it was like incredible to see some of these people like really understand like raw math, and then hear like, somebody say something very motivated from physics and immediately be like, yes, we should talk later.
And so your research was physics related. So have you like, what's your experience coming up against that frontier of physics?
It is difficult. I think, it is something that I would love to be able to like attack. I know many, I had many professors, my advisor is one of these people who really are able to like firmly planted in the seat of math, but really able to like understand what the physicists are saying. I mean, a lot of it is like nomenclature and such,
Sure.
like they use some word and I'm like, I don't know what that word means, but it's something that I like totally know, but it's like, I don't know what that word means.
Right.
A lot of language.
Yes, to like maybe step outside of what I do, but still like kind of things that I'm interested in trying to do to like maybe appeal to Katie a little bit.
This all appeals to me.
No, but I'm gonna hopefully appeal a little bit more and talk about biology for a second. There's some work that was done. I don't know if it's still being done. That relates topological recursion actually to virology, and the interest there is, I guess like you have your like RNA is some weird twisted knot kind of object, and their idea, I guess, was to use this procedure again, this recursive procedure, to understand the topology of the RNA.
Whoa, very cool.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
look at that.
There was a bit too much biology in it for me to understand, but I was like, that sounds kind of cool.
That does sound cool. It's amazing what we find applications for.
Yeah.
Now, Christopher, how did you get here?
Yeah.
Were you an undergrad and you had all these math classes and then someone said Higgs bundles and your ears perk up and you're like, that's me? Like, how did you get to this field?
Well, so, I've always enjoyed math and such, but I always enjoyed science, like when I was young, I was like reading books about like the stars and stuff. It was like, oh, the universe is so cool. As I like went through like elementary school and high school, I really found that I loved physics actually. And
as you should.
Yes, as we all should. And in my first year of university, I had to take a math class that was, my first year calculus was like somewhere between do a lot of calculations and do a lot of proofs. So I got like a peek behind the curtain. And it was actually like really cool to kind of see the inner workings of mathematics. Like we do all these things that we like take for granted when we like add things together, or when we like take an integral. Well, I don't know if the average person has ever taken an integral or ever will want to.
Not without paying for it.
We do all these things, and it was really cool to, I guess, see how it all worked. And so I slowly started to take more math courses. I actually transitioned to a math and physics degree. And then at some point I was just like, God, math is so cool. Like there are just all these weird things that start to like fall into place, or like that, like, these two crazy different ideas are somehow like intricately connected. Like, it's like, it's wild to me sometimes that it's like, we at some point in human life, we were like, we need a way to count. Let's invent 1, 2, 3. And from from there, we've like created this abstract system of thinking that like butts heads against like theoretical physics, which should be like, how the universe is governed. And so somewhere along the line, I was like, damn, we built something really cool.
Absolutely. And where do you think your research is going to go? Are you sticking in these areas, or is your lab going to be investigating completely different stuff?
I will be largely doing the same kind of stuff that I've been doing. There were some like, should I find myself the time to like learn about biology? I actually am quite interested in like this application to virology because I think that's just like a really neat application.
And yeah, I mean, that's understanding viruses is a very hot topic right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And will continue to be so long as climate change doesn't preclude our continued existence.
Yoinks.
It's a battle for supremacy of what's going to cause us to go extinct. Climate change or pandemics
Viruses.
exacerbated
It's a
by
race to
climate
the
change.
bottom.
It's a race to the bottom.
I've got this question. I've asked physicists this question. I don't know that I've ever asked a mathematician
watch out,
one.
Dr. Mahadeo.
Maybe this is like going to be evident to you, but is math invented or is it discovered? And by that, this is a little bit philosophical in the idea that math exists outside of the human experience, or is it a tool that humans have invented to understand the universe around them? So is it an invention that humanity has come up with, or is it a discovery that exists inherently in our universe?
This might be a harder question than the ice cap question.
You got 30 seconds to answer. No.
I'm like inclined to say that it's maybe a little bit of both. I think like ideas are discovered and then the mechanisms, quite sometimes the mechanisms to study them are what is developed. Like, let's even like talk about calculus. At some point Newton was out there like inventing calculus, and it came from like a natural place, but for like many years we didn't have the right tools to adequately describe calculus. Now you sit in any calculus class, the first thing you learn about are limits. And
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to say, it's now we're entering like my like math knowledge to say like, well, how was a limit really, how did that really first
Shit.
Sure.
But you have something like, now we have the adequate language to describe this stuff. I think it's a kind of like a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Like someone discovers this like new wonderful idea, and maybe they don't, maybe the language to adequately describe it doesn't exist, the tools to study it. And so it's like, we must make the tools because this is so cool.
That's a good answer. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I know I have no place in this argument, but I feel like it's the same thing, right? The connection with physics that you can observe makes it so tempting to say it's part of something real. But like Christopher was saying numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's parts of it that we sort of invent because it works
Interesting.
well.
I would
right?
say physics is always discovered because it's just a description of the world.
No, for sure.
we
But
live
the fact that math can explain it so well tells you that there's a real natural quality to it.
in. So are you saying it's invented or it's discovered?
Math, a bit of both, because
Okay, it
there's
is a
part
bit
of
of
it
both.
that
Yeah,
our
sure.
human brains are inventing the symbols and the digits and the things to sort of make
Sure.
it tangible.
Anyways, I find it an interesting idea.
Well, we solved math and physics today.
Wow, this was a productive podcast. I don't know about you guys, but
Yeah, I'm surprised more people don't listen to this podcast. We've done a lot. We've done a
We've
lot.
done a lot for a lot of fields, and
We've solved a lot of problems.
we've earned the 2 and 2 donuts. I want all 4.
We're gonna go for donuts after this,
Absolutely.
everybody.
Well, Christopher, we're out of time, but that was amazing. Thank you for taking time away from your new office and your new career, Dr. Mahadeo, to answer our very basic donut questions.
no, I'm like very happy to be here. I love to talk about math, and I love to do my best to make people understand what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
And
That
from
was so good.
From someone who loved math but never had a math teacher that could communicate it, you're going to be awesome. And thank you for doing what you can to make math tangible and fun.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Christopher. Have a good night.
Yes, thank you so much.
That was amazing.
That was so cool.
When I was picking majors for undergrad,
Yes.
a top contender
Oh my goodness. Please say math.
was a double major in math and philosophy.
Oh. So you really like that question at the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I ended up not, because my first year calculus class was my weakest subject, and I run away from things that are hard. But always loved math.
It's a good field. Yeah. I had the weird experience in my physics degree where my math classes, due to a scheduling hiccup, my math classes always came after the physics class that I needed it in. So I would sit in the physics class and like say an electromagnet, and then we do like Green's theorem. We're like, I don't know what this is. What's going on? This is doing all these crazy math stuff. Then we'd have to like outside of class just sit down and teach ourselves this math. Then the next term, we'd get a math class, and I'd be like, and this is how Green's theorem works. And I'd be like, are you kidding me? I could have used this 6 months ago. It was so frustrating. But it really gave me a good appreciation for math because, like, as a tool, it's so powerful. And when you understand what's happening as a describer for the world around us, it's really beautiful. It's kind of amazing that it works as well as it does.
Well, we learned a lot today, Vinny.
Yeah, I think so, too.
We learned about clean steel.
Yeah. We learned about the Human Genome Project, which only recently finished. I don't know what you were high-fiving each other about.
Well, we figured out the rest of the mysterious Y chromosome. And, of course, we learned tons about
of math.
Topological recursion and donuts.
Yeah, very cool.
Not as much ice cap information.
I'm glad you took away the donut part of all of this.
There's still work to be done, is what I've learned.
Right. It's the Human Genome Project of donuts.
Why don't you send them off on our socials, Vinny?
If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can check us out at LRG Pod. That's LRG Pod on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you'd like to be a guest or you know someone who would make a great guest, have them send us an email or send us an email yourself. LearnRealGoodPodcast@gmail.com. LearnRealGoodPodcast@gmail.com.
Well, that's it for us this week. Thank you, Vinny.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher Mahadeo.
Thank you very much, everybody in math and physics.
and everything beyond and in between.
To everybody who makes donuts.
Off to Tim Hortons.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.